Hi, everyone. Welcome to IBM Developer Tech Talks. On this Tech Talk today, we're going to learn how to track the International Space Station and other satellites built with Node-RED and IBM Watson. My name is Anamita Guha, and I'm a product manager on a team called Watson Developer Labs and AR/VR Labs. And I have with me Scott D'Angelo, and I'll have him introduce himself.
I'm Scott D'Angelo. I'm a developer advocate, and I build small proof of concepts called code patterns, which demonstrate how to use Watson's services and other IBM platforms.
Cool. Let's get started.
So this pattern can be found at developer.ibm.com under patterns, along with many others. And all of the code lives in GitHub at github.com/IBM. This one is called Satellite Tracker. All the code's open source, freely available. You can use it, modify it as you like. And if you go to the repository, you'll see a README file that tells you everything you need to know to build this application. So this is the case's Satellite Tracker. It basically uses a tool called Node-RED to build a flow using the Node-RED editor. Allows you to build web pages. It's often used for Internet of Things. In this case, we're going to use some third-party modules for a world map and for the satellite tracker to create a nice UI and show you how to use it integrated with IBM's Watson Assistant to have conversation back and forth implemented as a chatbot. So I will go through some instructions on how to build this. Basically, we'll clone the repository in GitHub, and this will show you everything you need to know. Right here in the repository, we've got all the tools we need. One thing we'll do, we're going to need to do is we're going to create a Watson Assistant service. And like all IBM Cloud services, you can access it via your console.bluemix.net catalog URL. This, like most services, is available with a free tier, which we call the Light plan. So it gives you quite a few API calls per month for free. If you need to upgrade to a standard tier or a premium tier, you're more than welcome to. So we create our Watson Assistant application. I give it a name. And we'll spin that up, show you how to use that. Meanwhile, all the instructions are here. It teaches you how to create the application, get your credentials, and utilize those credentials. Once this thing is ready, we can see our service credentials by clicking here. And those are all going to be available with a username and password that you'll use to access the application. Here under the Manage tab, we're going to go ahead and launch the tool. And there's some information available to those who aren't familiar about creating intents and entities, building your dialogue. Intents are basically the verbs, things you want to do, places you want to go in your dialogue, and entities are nouns, things that it can detect. Let me go ahead and show you a demonstration. If we go to Import Workspace here, I can choose a file and I can go to my repository. And here under Satellite Tracker Data, we have the Assistant Workspace. And if I click on Sat Tracker Workspace.json and import it, it will bring all of the pre-configured Watson Assistant intents entities into our workspace. So we have intents, for example, what is the International Space Station, where, when we're looking for the location, where is it in the future, where historical.
So Scott, when you, what do you think of when you think of intents? Like, what's the difference between an intent or an entity in dialogue?
It's something you'd like to do. So I always think of them as verbs, but it's something you want to do. And what the assistant tool will do is it will extract the intent from whatever conversation you send to it. So if you say, what is the International Space Station, then it will understand from our intent what. You can you give some examples. What does ISS stand for? What is the ISS? You could add 100 examples if you want. And whenever something similar to that is detected by the assistance service, it will conclude that the intent is what. Now, what do you do with something like an intent of what? It depends. In our case, we're just going to extract intents, and we're going to extract entities like location. What we don't do much of in this conversation, but you can get very complex with, is you create a dialogue. So for example, this dialogue for location now, if the bot recognizes the intent where, then you respond with, we choose some text, but you can do an image, you can do an option, you have a lot of ability to choose what your response is. Let me find the ISS. Or you could have 5 different variations and it'll randomly pick them. It's a very powerful tool. You can really dig deep into it. But you can build complex dialogues that it's often used for implementing a chatbot, for example. You can use it to create a frequently asked questions page. Basically, defining your intents, what it is you're trying to do, define your entities, various nouns that you want to be detected. And then here in your dialogue, you can ask questions, based on what intent it's recognizing, or maybe what entities. You can make things as complex as you want. One thing and another, or another. So you have operators, you have intents and entities, and by using them, you can trigger all kinds of logic to follow down a path that can get pretty complex if you like. For our purposes, we're just extracting intents and entities to make a basic chatbot.
And what we're building, we actually have everything built out. Is that correct?
That's correct. You just use this tool here, import a workspace, and it will pull it all in. You can customize it. You could take this code and modify it for your own uses. You could play around with Watson Assistant for a long time and really create very complex chatbots or other uses for it. Here for our satellite tracker workspace that we built, if we click here, and that's going to be important later. We're going to use that in our application, and we're also going to use the credentials. So both of those are going to be used in our satellite tracker. You can see right here the step-by-step instructions with the screenshots to do just exactly what I've just done. So we also want to create a Node-RED workspace. We can just open up the catalog. We can search for Node-RED. And there's a Node-RED starter kit that we can click on, and we can create our Node-RED application. I've already got this running right here. Let me back it up a bit to show you what you're going to see when you first. So it'll start you off with some information about Node-RED. So Node-RED is a flow-based programming environment. There's lots of information about how to add new nodes to the palette, securing the editor, all manner of thing. But what it basically does in the Node-RED editor is it allows you to build flows. So you can drag and drop any of these tools and wire them together. Oops, that one's not going to wire very well. And build these complex flows that can be used for Internet of Things. It can be used for a variety of purposes. You have these nodes that perform various types of input, output. You have function nodes that you can just define the function yourself. And of course, we have our IBM Watson tools. So any of the IBM Watson services like Assistant, Discovery, Language Translator, Natural Language Classifier, Text-to-Speech, they're all available to you here in the Node-RED environment. Once we have our nodes, we can do things like name them, define a function, and all this is done with JavaScript. So the engine itself is a Node.js engine, and then the tools you use are in JavaScript. So what will we do for our satellite tracker? Well, there's an easy way and a hard way, and we explain that. One thing we'll do is we need to install a few extra nodes, Node-RED credentials, world map, and satellites. So here in our editor, we can go here to our manage palette, and it'll tell you what nodes are already there, and we can install things like world map. It'll search for it. I've already installed it, so it finds it pretty easy. Same thing with satellites. There's a lot of third-party packages out there. I think there's something like 20,000 nodes available for the Node-RED editor. So the instructions will tell you how to do the installation of the nodes. And if you wish to import the completed flow, it's pretty easy. We give the instructions right here. If we go to data, Node-RED, we have the completed flow here. And if on my Mac, I can do pb copy for the flow, and that copies it to my clipboard. There's similar tools for Windows and Linux. Now, if we go to our flow and I import to the clipboard, all I have to do is paste it right in there, and I can import the entire flow.
So Scott, sometimes I know for Node-RED, we need to install the Node-RED package from Watson. Is that something we have to do here too, if this is our first time?
No, if you're running it locally, you would, because that Watson package is a third-party package. But if you're running it in the IBM cloud, it comes already in here. So when you create your Node-RED from the Node-RED starter on the IBM cloud, you'll automatically get all of the Watson tools. So I'm going to go over quickly how to do it with this version, and then we can talk a little bit about what you would do if you wanted to learn a little bit more about Node-RED and build this thing manually. So ultimately, this thing is all wired together. We basically have some HTML tools like post, which will post to /botchat. We have things that process the input. We have things to do timestamps and stuff. The things we're going to need to modify are this assistant node, and we're going to need the username and password in our case. Some of the regions use an API key, but we'll just simply enter our username and password. And then, as I showed you before, we have our workspace ID here, so you would also add that. Save it all off, and then one thing we'll need here is a third-party map tool. I went ahead and wrote this using Location IQ. There are others, but Location IQ allows you to get an API key. Very simple. You can just try it out. Give it your email. They'll send you an API key, and then you can enter it here in your Node-RED editor. Under the credentials node, our API key goes in there. We save that off. That's all the configuration you'll need to do. I'll go over a little bit more detail of how we build this manually, but really the best way to do it is to play around and pull in things and look at the nodes themselves. You can see how we can use the switch node to assess the intents that are coming back from our Watson Assistant service, and if we get the where intent, we're going to go to output 2. If we get the where historical, output 3. I'll give you a little bit more details. But I've already built this over here, and it's already deployed. So let's see what this looks like. So here's the ISS tracker bot. I've got a little chat bot over here. If I say, where is the ISS? It shows where it is right now. Latitude and longitude, it doesn't have an address because it's over the ocean. We could say, where was the ISS 20 minutes ago? and it'll show you the path it's taken as it traverses above the planet. We can say, show me in 3D, and it'll change to a 3D map. If your machine is a little bit slow, this does render in the browser, so it's quite possible that that might be a little bit slow for you, but generally you have this nice 3D map, and you can find where the space station is if we can find it. Let's see, where will the ISS be? 20 minutes. There's the path it's going to take, so it'll be over Africa in about 20 minutes. So how does this all work? Let's go back to our editor. Ultimately, we have our chat API where we process chat input and we send it off. This is this entire bit right here is all to power the tracker bot. We handle the intents right here, and the intents define what happens with the map itself, whether it's a 3D map or a 2D map. Close to Europe there. And then we have some tools for the world map. So the shortest and simplest path is to build it like that. What we do in our instructions is we give you some tools to build it manually, which is all part of the repository. And we'll use the same sort of PB copy from a file to fill out each individual node. And if we follow the instructions, we can grab a bunch of nodes. So we have, for example, an HTTP input node, function nodes, the assistant node, timestamp node, and we can actually just drag and drop these guys. An input node, a function node. Where's my instructions? The assistant node. We grab these guys, we wire them up together, and then we kind of give you some instructions here. If you double click the first node and change it to post to the URL chat, then you're done there. Some of the things are a little bit more complicated, so we have some code in here in the repository for process chat input. Let's see. So we can do PB copy process chat input, and that'll copy it to my clipboard. And if we click on the function node, we can just paste it right in here. So we try to keep it simple. You can name it. We kind of give you some ideas of what to name it. Process chat input. You really want to learn how to build this. I'd recommend you walk through these instructions, click on each one, wire it up, and see how it works. If you make any mistakes, you'll find out soon enough when you run it, because there's some pretty good debug output. But really, that's the gist of it. If you follow these instructions, you can get sort of a step-by-step way to build these nodes. There's some nice Giphies here that kind of explain exactly what we're doing, pulling in each individual one, connecting them together, opening them up and configuring them. And that's how I built this thing in the first place. So I don't know that there's much more to explain. I think that the exercise for the user is to kind of build this thing completely. You'll get a really good idea of Node-RED and the flow editor. You can see exactly how we use various nodes. The satellite node, which I will show you, is actually a third-party node that allows you to pick satellite types. There's weather, there's GPS, Galileo, there's a whole bunch of satellites. Basically every satellite that we know of that's available to us as, you know, US taxpayers. NASA provides all this stuff for free. So you could actually track other things besides the space station. We use third-party tools from World Map, the Earth node, which is what creates that Earth in our UI. And if you follow the instructions straight through, you can see I've got little giffies that kind of describe each and every one. Drag and drop them, connect them all together, click on each one, and then use the information that's in the repository to either copy it to your clipboard or cut and paste as you like into the individual nodes. So that's it. We have a chatbot that you can ask questions to. We can see things using our Earth maps in, say, 3D. We could track the satellite, in this case, the International Space Station. And you can sort of get a good glimpse of how to use Node-RED.
Awesome, and we did all that in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Node-RED, and you can build fairly complex tools, and you can sort of get a nice visual of how it works. It does help you, you know, when you want to modify some of these things, you can add new modules and wire them together very easily. I mean, it's just really very convenient, very quick tool to learn and tool to use.
Very cool. So can you go back to the link, please, Scott, of the
GitHub repository?
Yeah. Okay, so for those of you that are listening, you can find the details of what Scott just showed us on this GitHub link. There's also another link in the summary that takes you to IBM Developer, which one has everything that we went through today in the GitHub available to you, presented in a more marketing aesthetic way. But there's also a lot of other content in here. So if you're interested in exploring other things you can do with IBM Watson, other things you could do with data from the International Space Station, you can find that all here linked together.
There we go.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.